The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, welcome to Vision New England's Justice and Mercy webinar series. My name is Bob Atherton and I'm here with Mike Froning and we'll be the hosts today. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. The big truth that this series is built on is that justice and mercy are key aspects of who God is, and doing justice and loving mercy are core parts of being a follower of Christ. We want to use these times to encourage those who are already deeply investing in justice and mercy and give some practical vision for those who are just newly exploring what it is and what it can look like. So just a couple things before we start. The webinar will end at 12:45, and as we continue through the webinar, if you have a question that you want to ask our speaker, you can submit that at any point. If you see the chat box in your control panel, you'll be able to submit a question through that, and we will bring your question into the conversation. So before we start, I'd like to pray, and then we'll get started. Lord, I thank you that we can come to you today and once again just gather around you and listen to your heart for justice and mercy. I'm so thankful for those who have joined us who are deeply invested in justice and mercy in different causes, different organizations, and in their own life. And as we explore some new ground today, Lord, I pray that you'll help us to take it in, to listen and hear what it is that you're saying to us. And we pray for your blessing over our conversation and that you'll use it to lift us up and encourage us forward. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I'm super excited to welcome Joel Hubbard as our speaker today. Joel is a dear friend, and he's the Senior Pastor of Vine39, which is a vineyard church in Stoneham, Mass. And the reason I asked Joel to join us today and lead us through this conversation is that, boy, he's just really wrestled through this subject matter that we're talking about today, and he's giving great leadership to his church in learning how to live it out in their church community. And so, Joel, welcome, and looking forward to chatting today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah. So let's start. If you talk with people who have gotten deeply involved in a cause like human trafficking or caring for immigrants or finding a cure for a disease, it seems like a lot of people, have a cause that they've attached to. They often have a story, and that story either says, that was me, the cause that I've invested in, I was there, and now I'm kind of beyond that, and now I want to do something so that it can be better for others. Or other people have in their story a sense of, man, I never knew much about that issue, but now that I know, I really have to do something about it. And let's just start there. That story is really common, and give us some thoughts. That's a good thing, right? I mean, God somehow is working in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely am a fan of people who are coming out of their own brokenness, their own past that was difficult, and they turn around and they become an advocate. They fight in the right way for people who are or were in the same position they were in, and so I think I'm a big fan of all that. I think it's wonderful, and I know I've got a lot of friends who that's their story, and I have my own. So I think we all do. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we're going to look beyond that though today. The thing that we're highlighting is that as good as that is, as good as getting involved in causes is, that God actually calls us and calls our churches further than that. He wants us to be more than cause-driven people and cause-driven churches. So open that up for us. How can being cause-driven limit us? And what is that more that God wants to bring us into?
Yeah, yeah, I think by way of getting into it, my own upbringing was one in which I saw, I grew up in the church. I grew up in a very conservative, fundamentalist sort of background, and so my family, we were all church-going people, and we would get behind certain causes. A big one when I was younger was very much a pro-life movement, getting involved in that, and we were strong on that. I mean, it just, for us, abortion was the biggest one. Today there are other issues that have come into play, but divorce was a big one when I was young, and remarriage, and then abortion. And I want to differentiate between what a belief is really and what a cause is. I think we got beliefs, but then when we turn that into a cause, it becomes a particular focus on that issue, and there's a lot of good about that. But in the situation, let me just use the example of abortion. Many of us growing up, we became so focused on that that we didn't think beyond being anti-abortion. We called ourselves pro-life, but it really was more about anti-abortion than it was about anything else. And we also didn't really think about questions of what's happening to these people, these young women who are having abortions. What's their story? Why is this happening? And it became very much about a rule, a law, more than it was about the individuals themselves, the people. And I think that tempered a lot for me as I began to know some of them and hear their stories and weep with them. Things became more complex in a good way, and it doesn't change, and it never really changed my belief about we want to prevent abortions as much as possible, but it made it so much larger than just simply being focused on being anti-abortion, as an example.
Yeah. So when we talk about God wanting to carry us further than that cause focus, what are we really talking about? Like, where is it that he wants to take us?
I think it's in connection to people. For me, everything revolves around this idea of God wanting us to learn to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. It's the summation of the 613 commandments of the Old Testament. It's the summation of the biblical law, the whole point of everything God was doing. I love what someone said. The law is not something we look at. It's something we look through to see God, and I would add to see people as well. The whole point of the law was for God to say, this is a practical application of my commandment for you to love the Lord your God and to love your neighbor. But we become very focused sometimes on the law than on the people themselves, and I think God is always trying to bring our attention back, and in particular we see that in and through the life of Jesus, to say, but I'm pointing you to people. And here's an excellent example of what happens when we lose sight of loving the Lord our God and loving our neighbor, is that we turn into the Pharisees of the day. We turn into the scribes, the experts of the law, who seemed very religious, seemed very pious, and seemed very moral. I mean, no one questioned their morality. Their morality was, even though Jesus did question their morality compared to everybody else, or at least on appearances, seemed better. And Jesus says, but you get the whole thing wrong. It's not about this thing that you're focusing on. It's about people. And I have a lot more to say about that whole thing and what's currently happening even in our day to day as we are losing focus again. I feel on people and turning much more into focusing on rules and laws, and that causes more division. That causes, and in fact, people I think are finding, we're finding ourselves no longer really knowing our neighbor. We learn about our neighbor through the media. We learn about our neighbor through social media. We're actually not meeting and sitting with our neighbor, even if we claim to love our neighbor. And I think that's the edge to the gospel for today.
Yeah, yeah. So let's dial into that, a little further, and really, maybe talk about it on a blatantly practical level. As we were sending out the promo for this webinar, we said that Jesus calls us into the trenches of respectful and compassionate relationships. So trenches sounds like a tough spot, right? And the trenches of respectful and compassionate relationships, like, what does that look like? And, why is it so hard?
Why is it so hard? I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me too. I think I find myself sometimes feeling better than. I don't know. It's a strange thing. It's seductive, and it's so subtle. I never even notice it happening. But I'll be sitting across the table from one of our refugee friends, and it's a family that as a church, we're taking care of and trying to help. And I become the answer man. I don't know if that ever happens to anyone else, but I just find myself, I feel like I'm the answer man. I feel like I'm the one who's got all the right answers. I don't know what happens in my mind. Maybe it's just because I'm a pastor and that happens to me, but there's this switch that happens in which I feel somewhat superior in many ways, and I don't want to. It's not something I'm looking to do. In fact, I feel terrible as I think about that. Like, that's really awful. And yet, it happened this week. I was sitting across the table from one of our friends, and he said, he's asking me some questions, and we start talking. We have spiritual conversation, and he's Muslim, and we're talking, and as he's asking questions about the Bible and asking questions about faith, I start salivating. That's the stuff I love. But I found myself beginning again to see myself as superior to him and to his experience, and I had to back down and just enter into humility to look at him as my equal, and in fact to do what Paul commands us to do, which is to prefer one another, to actually lift that person up, and not in a patronizing way, like I'm here to serve you, to help you because you're the broken one, you're the one who's hurting, and I'm the one who's doing well, but to look at him as he is me and I'm him, and whatever capacity I have to serve him, I serve him, not as me being better than him, me being in a better place than he is, but me as putting myself down and lifting him up. It's a mindset of humility that's really difficult, I think, to live in consistently.
Yeah, so you're talking about this relationship. It's a relationship in your church, and I know that you have really worked hard, first of all, to kind of live into this yourself, but also you're working to really help your church develop a culture of respect and compassion, and to look at each other not from these superior lenses, but through again, this more respectful and compassionate lens. So talk to us about what that looks like on a church level, and just some of the journey of helping the church to take hold of this.
Yeah, it's I really I love this part of the conversation, because it's something that I feel like I've been working at for a long time. I come from a very Parisian French culture. That was my upbringing. I spoke French before I spoke English. And in my culture and the types, the personalities of my parents were that we never admitted weakness ever. And then my temperamental type on top of that is if you know, the Enneagram is an 8, and we 8 types hate weakness. I mean, it's something that we will come to the rescue of those who are weak. That's part of our temperament, but we hate vulnerability and weakness within ourselves. And so I have had to work diligently at being transparent, at being authentic, at being vulnerable, and in seeing other people as not just weak or as helpless or as needing anything from me, but as treating them as an equal has been really a lifelong journey for me. And the reverse is also true. Like, I can tend to look at other people who I think are amazing and start to put them on a pedestal. And I think the part that's been really helpful for me has been to understand, first of all, that I am one who has been lost and has been found, but I'm also one who is continually needing to be found. It's not just a one and done. And I think it's the point also of that parable in Luke, which is, don't ever consider, I mean, you can consider yourself one of the 99, but that's actually not a good thing. The 99 were the ones who were the religious elite, who thought of themselves as having been found and needing nothing. I mean, the whole thing, the 3 parables paired up together are actually brilliant, because he finishes off with the parable of the prodigal son. And the parable of the prodigal son is not that the prodigal son is the one that needed rescuing, and we ought to be more compassionate about rescuing him. That's part of it, but it's not the only part. That's not the only punch to that. The edge of that is that the older brother refuses to come into the party that the father has thrown for the younger son. And the older son is, again, those who are the more religious types. And so it's the lesson there is, do you recognize, as the older son, do you recognize your need for the father as much as the younger son has need for the father as well? And I think when I live that way, then I look to the person who comes to me Sunday after service and is moved emotionally by whatever they've experienced and begins to open up and tell me about certain past trauma that they've experienced or sins they've been wrapped up into. And we've developed a culture in our church where we don't treat people as, oh, you're so broken, we're going to just all come around you and care for you. Rather, it's more of a community where, hey, we recognize we all got stuff, we've all got brokenness, we've all got sin, and in fact, I really push our people, if you don't know what your current sin or current brokenness or whatever the Lord is doing in your life to transform you, if you're not in the present right now in that space of transformation and of growth, then I'm not sure Jesus has much for you. Because Jesus says, I've come not for those who think they are well, but for those who know they're broken, those who know they're sick. And for me, that's an everyday. I just talked about this Sunday. You know, we have past tense Christians. We have future tense Christians. You know, past tense, I once was this really broken person, and I had, was on drugs, and I came to faith in Jesus 20 years ago, and I've been following him. And everybody claps and loves that story, and I find myself kind of sickened by that, because my question isn't, I'm glad you were transformed, but you're not talking about anything that's present, that's happening now, and that's what I'm interested in hearing. And then you have your future tense Christians, which is, all about the return of Jesus, and, one day everything's going to be fixed, and we all look forward to that. But present day is, what is God doing in your life right now? And what transformation is he working in you? And if we know what that is, and we're continually open to God in that space of our brokenness, in the space of our sin, then we're always being transformed. And I think that creates a space that, from what I've been told from many of our folks, is that it creates a safe environment for them to begin to open up and be real about what's going on currently in their lives.
Yeah, and this is so important because, I'm sure you do, and I do as well. I talk with so many people who feel like they're going to church because they have to, and once they get there, they feel sometimes more alone than they would if they had stayed home. You know, that
Yeah.
the kind of the relational dynamic of the church is so uninviting and maybe shallow that that they really don't feel comfortable or safe to really take next steps and experience community in the church. Is that something you've seen too? And like, how do you think about
Yeah.
that particular dynamic?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is something that growing up, my parents were church steeplechasers. We bounced around from church to church. My sister and I one day counted. We had attended 22 different churches from the time we could ever, some time we could remember from being born, all the way to the time probably about age 18. So that's a lot of churches in 18 years. And what I kept realizing from church to church, I mean, this is in retrospect, I didn't see it at the time, but how much of it was image. We were very image conscious people. We had been told that, once you come to Jesus, once you're saved, that's it, man. The old is gone, the new has come. And that verse got pulled out of its context and made to say things that it never intended to say. And so, we lived with this tension, this pressure of, we have to be good because God died for, Jesus died for you. You have to change and you have to be better. And we never really wanted to deal with the brokenness. We wanted it to be gone. And so we worked so hard at presenting this outside that was clean, that was good, that was all set. And internally, and I think we did our family was always the one that pastors loved our family. Oh, they loved our family because we all looked great. No one knew on the inside what I was full of. No one knew on the inside how much junk was there. And I think that that's what people experience when they come into church, is they see all these people put together, and so we work really hard at it, and I think our church has worked hard at it, and we're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of people have found themselves opening up and feeling comfortable in life groups, in our small groups, on Sunday mornings, and collectively there's not, for the most part, there's not this response from people of like, wow, or really being put off or being uncomfortable around that. In fact, we're sort of deep water people. We just, oh yeah, oh cool, yeah, let's talk about that, and people feel surprisingly comfortable in doing that. I think it just takes a lot of work, but I do see it, and I think the church is changing, because I talk to a lot of people, pastor friends of mine, and it's changing. It's changing in a lot of churches where we're starting to say this. We can't keep doing this. We've got to get to that. Be okay with being broken, be okay with being sinners, be okay with talking about it, exposing it, and then walking out the road of transformation. So it's not just oh, we just want to love you and accept you, and you don't have to change one bit. Not at all. The invitation is, come as you are. You're fully accepted as you are. But Jesus is going to start talking to you about some things that are going to be really, really difficult and really painful. But that's for the purpose of transforming you, and we want to walk that journey with you, because it's painful for us too, and we have people walking with us, and so we do this as a community.
So let's say there's someone who's listening to this, and they're saying, yeah, man, my church is just really not a very inviting place. It's not safe, and I know friends who have tried to come and they just haven't felt comfortable being themselves, or maybe I haven't felt comfortable being myself, but they're committed to the church and they really want to see their church move in this direction. What would you say to them in terms of, if they want to move away from a church culture that really hinders that openness and compassion and kind of depth of community? If they want to move away from that and move toward a culture where the openness is there and there's real invitation to walk alongside of each other? Where do they start? How can they impact their church to move in this direction?
I'll tell you a story. A friend of mine, good friend of mine, no longer is in the area. We were attending the same church together many years ago, and he said he went to this men's group, and I wasn't there for that. I was on staff at the church, and he said, so he tells me this, I don't know, maybe a couple years after the event. He says, so I went to the men's group. There's about like 30 guys there. They're all sitting in a circle, and we went around and we began talking about, what are our prayer requests? What do we need prayer for? Because we want to pray for each other. And so as they're going around, every one of the prayer requests were very superficial. It was very safe sort of prayer requests. Oh, pray for my aunt. She's struggling with this. And pray for my friend, pray for my neighbor, and he says, hey guys, I just need to admit to you, I'm addicted to porn, and I really need prayer for that, and I'd love to talk about that. I'd love some help. And the way he describes it is very humorous, but also sad. But he said it was that literally the facilitator just, everybody was frozen and silent. And the facilitator just said, okay, well, yeah, we'll pray for that. Okay, anyone else? And just went on. And we laugh about it now because of the awkwardness and the discomfort of that. But this was the sort of church we were in. And so he began by pushing really hard towards having this sort of a culture. He wanted it. He needed it. And he began talking with me about stuff, and both of us began working together, and pretty soon we involved some others. Now, the downside of it is the church never caught it, and so, but that group of us, we did. And we have moved on since, and we bless that church. We have friends with a lot of people there, love the people. But we had to move on because for us, our journey meant that this had to happen. And let me just say this as a warning. I am convinced of this because it's been my own journey, and I've seen it happen way too many times as a pastor. And I also think it's just thoroughly biblical. Is if you stay in a place, or you stay yourself in denial or in repression of your sin, because you want to be acceptable by God, you want to make it to heaven, you want to do right by your family, you want to be a good person, you will never conquer that sin. It will never, ever go away. No matter how many times you pray about it, there comes a point where you will have to bring in other people and journey with other people. I think it's Dietrich Bonhoeffer talks about that, Life Together book, and it broke me. When I read that, it broke me because I'm a very private, when it comes to those deep sins, I'm very private. And I could not get myself through a particular sin, and it has taken me years to finally say, okay, I can't live this way. I can't keep hiding it. I have to bring in other people. And as I began to open up, I experienced the grace and the love of Jesus in such a way I can't explain it. It's just the most profound, loving experience because grace is communicated not just vertically. In fact, I would argue that grace is communicated horizontally. The love of Jesus, the grace of Jesus, his compassion, his healing is done through other people, through his church. And we avoid that, and we avoid that for one reason only, and that's the ego. And I think that that's something that I really encourage everyone. Join me. I mean, I'm not living this perfectly myself. There's one sin I finally said, all right, and it was literally 2 weeks ago. I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm not hiding this. I'm coming clean, and I did so. And it is already having profound effect in me.
Mm.
So I think, again, it's just the way of the Lord. It's the way of the gospel, and it works. But I would encourage you, if you're in a church that does not have this culture, is you start. And don't worry about whether the church catches it or doesn't catch it. I mean, you start with whoever's around you. You begin that journey. And if you begin, then God will bring people to you. Things will start opening up for you. You'll be surprised. All kinds of God coincidences will begin taking place from stepping out and beginning that journey. So that's why I encourage you to do that. Encourage you to start there, and you'll find yourself having a stronger community, and maybe the Lord will bless and transform the church through you, or move you on to another church, or have you start a church. Who knows?
Yeah, there we go.
Some of you yeah, scared some of you, I'm sure.
Yeah. So there's one other thing I wanted to make sure we talked about today, because I think it's so important and relevant to this conversation, and that's that we want to look at people in a different way, and one of those ways is just understanding and embracing the fact that they are so much more than whatever labels we might first use to describe them. And you know, it's almost like we kind of mark people out and give them a label and relate to them on the basis of that label. And like you were saying earlier, it really takes some work to move beyond that and relate to them as a whole person.
Yeah.
Can you open that up to us and just maybe give a couple examples of what that's looked like for you?
Yeah. So we had someone come to our church. We've had a couple people in our church who were victims of human trafficking, and we've had we've had prisoners, people guys who had come out of prison, began attending our church. Some for violent crimes, and it's in some, a lot of them for drugs, and we haven't had a bunch of prisoners, but we've had a few, and we've had people who, gay people, bisexual people. We've had a bunch of different kinds, and it is human nature to label. It is so easy, and the natural thing to do is to see them by whatever it is that they are dealing with, and so it's not something that you can just say, well, I'm going to choose to see. We've got black people in our church, we've got Hispanic people, we've got Asian, so we've got a bunch of different kinds, and I've heard people say, well, I'm not color, I'm colorblind. I just see everybody the same, and it's funny because knowing and having studied racism for years, and having had many conversations with some of my non-white friends, is that that's actually not helpful to them. They don't particularly like that at all, because they're saying, look, I don't want you to treat me differently, but I want you to recognize that I am black. Just like that is part of my culture. That's part of my upbringing. And I think what helped me was recognizing my own upbringing, my own culture, and understanding that and pressing more deeply into who I am as a person. What is my culture? What is my upbringing? Then helped me to understand and to see people, I think, a bit differently, and see them as more multidimensional. I think we can easily reduce people to that single dimension of you're black, you're a criminal, you're an ex-criminal. I mean, and even jokes are being made around that, like, and lightheartedly, like, but still jokes are being made about this guy having been in prison for many years. And I think it's pressing in to know them. And the difficulty is that a lot of us are so busy that we actually do not practice the art of neighboring, as a friend of mine calls it. Wrote a book on it too. The art of neighboring is actually getting to know your neighbor, actually sitting with them. And I'm praying for a revival and a revolution in neighboring, because I think that will help stem the tide of a lot of what's happening in our country right now. And it's because we don't actually know each other. We don't sit with each other. I have a friend, pro-Trump supporter. I mean, Trump sign in his front yard. And I have friends who actually can't even, some of them are having a hard time coming back to church because they know that there's a Trump supporter in our church. And there's more than one. There's quite a few. But it's pretty evenly split. And so it's difficult because to have that work together is they begin to see each other again in those single dimensions. Oh, you're a pro-Trump. You're pro-Trump. Oh, then you're racist. Oh, then you're this, you're that. Instead of actually sitting and getting to talking with them, which is what I've been doing. And as I do that, I can't, it's hard, if I'm really being honest about, I'm asking these questions to actually know you and not to have a prepared argument against what you're saying, which is a very different way of talking. I think if we sit and actually ask questions to understand their heart, understand what makes you tick. You're like me, you are me and I'm you. What makes you tick? And we ask those questions, it becomes really difficult to fit them into that single dimension that we have in our minds. But I think it takes time, and you have to keep asking those questions. You have to keep sitting with people. So I've been telling people, I want you to make friends with a liberal. I want you to make friends with a conservative. I want you to sit and have dinner with them. I want you to talk with somebody of a different ethnicity with you. Get off of social media and begin actually loving your neighbor as yourself. If you do that, it'll change how you see them, and you'll begin to see them as whole people, as very interesting, multidimensional humans.
Yeah, and what happens in you when you do that? I mean, it seems like there's kind of a radical shift that happens there. Like, if you think of one of those instances that you've mentioned, you know, like what in your journey happened when you started making those choices to sit with people and listen to their story? What's some of the heart disruption that happens there?
You know, if there weren't as many people listening to this, I'd be a little bit more crass. But look, I hated it. I hated it, and I hated the process because I'd walk away going, they're wrong. I mean, they'd say things to me, and I'd get mad. Sitting in a conversation with them internally, at times, they would say things that would make me so mad. And I wanted to come to the defense of the other side, you know, or sometimes somebody who has been a victim of something begins to open up and tell me something. I want to go in and crush the person, the perpetrator. I want to, you know, so it's recognizing what is happening to you as you're having this conversation, and that's really emotional agility, is the ability to stand outside of yourself for a moment to go, what is happening to me? I'm becoming all worked up about this, and that may not be beneficial to this person right now. And so I have to recognize that. I also have to then take my junk as I leave that conversation and lift it up before the Lord. Ask Him about it. What's going on? What do you want to say to me about this? Because I'm all mixed up now. I was so sure of myself walking into this conversation, but now, you know, I want to be sure again, so I'm trying to argue in my own head why that person was wrong. I'm trying to, or reframe things so that I feel secure. I mean, all these things actually shake up our security, and that's fundamental to our sense of safety. And so it's not for the weak of heart. If you're going to have these conversations, you've got to be prepared. You will be shaken up, and you can resist it. But my encouragement is to enter into it and welcome Jesus in the space of your anxiety, welcome Jesus in the space of your pain, welcome Jesus in the space of your confusion, and your hate and your anger, whatever's going on. Open yourself up and welcome Jesus into that space, and that journey will begin to open your mind, and you'll see differently. That's the thing that happens at the end of this, is you see differently. It's not that everything changes or you fixed everything. It's you see differently, and now you're able to approach the situation in a much, I think, much healthier way, much more whole way than before.
Yeah, so wow, what a rich conversation, but I think, you know, here we land at at what we talked about earlier, the trenches of respectful and compassionate relationships. You know, it really is about that hard work of going further and going deeper with people who are all around us. You know, it can start in our own homes and, you know, and work out into our churches. And so, you know, part of what we're doing in this Justice and Mercy webinar series is just giving some fresh vision for how justice and mercy translates into our everyday lives. And as a disciple of Jesus, you know, how do we really embrace justice and mercy from God's perspective and translate it into the practical things of our daily lives? So Joel, thank you so much for a rich conversation, and we're just going to close with a few announcements that we want to mention before we close. One is we are super excited for the Go Conference. It's just coming up next week, February 17th and 18th. We have a great lineup of speakers. We have workshops that are going to be fantastic. We have vendors from all over New England who really are kind of carrying the torch of kingdom ministry around New England. And we want to invite you, if you haven't heard of it, to check out the website, goconference.org. If you are interested in going and haven't registered yet, you can do so through the website, and we really hope to see you there because it's going to be a great time for Christians from all over New England to come together. The second announcement we want to make is we look ahead to the next month. Our next webinar is going to be about foster and adoptive care, and talking about orphans among us, how the church can impact the foster care crisis in New England. And I'm so excited to have Marie Briggs joining us next month, and she'll be talking about her work in working with churches to move into orphan care, foster care, and adoptive care, and why the church is so uniquely equipped to address this need in New England. I think that's going to be a great conversation. And then finally, beyond that, on April 29th, the New England Faith and Justice Summit on Human Trafficking is coming up at Bethany Church in Greenland, New Hampshire. This is a one-day event, and this is an issue that has been kind of getting on the radar of many people around our nation and certainly in New England. And you know, the bottom line is it's happening here in New England, in every state, in every part of every state, and it is something that really requires a response, and there's so many ways that the church can step in and take strategic roles in addressing human trafficking in New England, and there are many who are doing great work already, and so part of this summit will be to celebrate that, but we also will be giving fresh vision for where the movement is at right now, how the church can step into it, and some of the key areas that we need to focus on moving ahead. So my hope is that you will check out the website, faithandjusticesummit.org, and we'll be posting our speaker team within the next few weeks, and we hope you'll register and join us for that event. So before we end, I'd like to close us in prayer, and just thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. Father, thank you for all the things that we've talked through today, and we want to embrace all that you are, and we want to work that into our relationships with each other. Thank you so much for Joel and his ministry, and I pray your blessing over him and his family. Thank you for everyone who's listening, who is really taking the lead in Justice and Mercy ministry throughout New England, and I pray your blessing over them. And Lord, for all of us, as we look at people who are in our lives, in our families, in our churches, around our workplaces, in our communities, Lord, help us to look at people as whole people and to take that step to just sit down with somebody and get to know them better, to get to know their whole person, and to kind of move beyond the labels and to get to love them as people. I love that phrase, neighboring. Help us learn to neighbor our neighbors. And so thank you, Lord, for a great conversation today, and we pray in Jesus' name, amen.